Why do so many relationships fail? Why is it that many people find themselves going through this kind of roller coaster ride of hooking up with people and breaking up and continuing this long, wild, painful ride? And it seems like love is evading them. And I'm convinced that this doesn't have to happen. So I'm going to try to answer the question of why these relationships don't work. And what does it really mean to be equally yoked? Now, what inspired me to do this was something I saw online. Allegedly, a very close friend to Klay Thompson has revealed the real reason why he broke up with Megan Thee Stallion. And allegedly, he said something about he was tired of her ghetto ways. He couldn't handle, her ghettoism, so to speak. And that was the real reason why he found a way to get out of the relationship. And you know that I don't know if that's true or not. And it's really not about them. I want to just talk about relationships in general, even though I'm using this story or part of this story as sort of a springboard. Remember, I don't know these people. They don't know me. I don't have an inside scoop. They don't know that I'm breathing. So I don't invest in people that like that. I'm not invested in people in the entertainment business, but I am concerned, deeply concerned about young people not being able to have healthy relationships. I know that God's original blueprint for us is to be in families, to have a man and a woman come together and marry and possibly have children. That is the original blueprint. Whenever a man gets away from God and you get distorted teaching, I talk about this a lot in my podcast. When you get bad religion, bad counsel, nothing good can come out of it. And if you look up any statistics about marriage, you'll see something like now over like 50% of marriages end in divorce. Even people who confess to be or proclaim to be Christians, their divorce rate is just as high as the secular world. So the reason why this exists is because of bad religion. Again, if you do something 1,000 times and it doesn't work, you're not supposed to do it. And I sort of marvel because people will keep teaching these same bad things and people keep getting bad results, and nobody will say, hey, we need to do something different. Something's wrong here. Something's not working. And most people, because they're so dependent upon man and not God for insight and revelation, they never learn the truth. Because if you really have your own personal relationship with God and you begin to fellowship with God and listen and meditate, you won't even be going through some of the stuff that people are going through because you're getting your advice directly from the Most High God. And instead of, again, bad teaching, bad religion, distorted misuse and abuse of the Holy Bible is really the number one reason why most relationships do not work. It's very sad. So, in this episode, I'm going to talk about 7 reasons why relationships don't work. Expect a book. I wrote a book almost 25 years ago. And since that time, and I told my daughter by the 25th anniversary, which will be 20, I think in 2 years, it'll be the 25th anniversary of my book. I'm going to go back and redo it. And I want to share some insight that I've learned over the last 25 years. But I pray and hope that this episode empowers people to have better relationships. It's possible. I'm a person, I will never, ever, ever waver in my faith that God can heal. I don't care how bad a situation is. God can restore. Reconciliation can take place, but it has to be done on both sides. It has to be mutual. It has to be equal. And that's why I'm going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to be equally yoked. So don't forget to like the video if you think it empowers you. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Let's get started. Peace and blessings. So I want to reiterate that this episode is really not about Megan Clay, but it's about relationships in general and why they don't work. And I'm going to share 7 major reasons why. Just try to break those down. And then as you listen to this, think about, do some self reflection and do an evaluation and assessment of your own life. And if 2 people who want to be together do this and they find out that they can work through these different issues, they could really have a strong, beautiful relationship. And I'm just never going to ever not believe that God is able to heal our people and heal their minds and heal their hearts. Number one reason, and I'm saying number one, but really I'm not going in any particular order. But one reason that relationships don't work is because people really don't want to be in a committed relationship in the first place. You have a lot of people who are like drifters, or they want to experiment, they want to explore, but they really don't want to be in a committed relationship. What I can't believe sometimes is that people just sort of mindlessly hook themselves up with people, and then they suffer the devastation of the breakup. Because once you get with a person, you get invested and you get bonded emotionally and spiritually. You give your body to a person, and then you didn't really want to be in a relationship in the first place. Guess what's going to happen? That relationship is going to end. Sometimes it ends in a very painful way. Sometimes people agree to just, separate in a very civilized way, but many times it doesn't, because somebody's going to get hurt because you've invested time. When people don't really want to be in a relationship, but they want to experiment and just have these experiences with people, you just guaranteed to have the roller coaster ride. It's dangerous for so many reasons, because when you're just kind of wandering and you're drifting and you're seeing what you can feel and see, you end up having things like unwanted pregnancy, you have disease, you have heartbreak, you even have death, because people cannot handle these emotional, when they bond emotionally, and then these detachments. And then we often talk about the STDs, the sexually transmitted diseases, but you also have the spiritually transmitted diseases. So the number one way to avoid having to go through a painful breakup is not even getting in a relationship until you know, number one, you want to be committed to someone. Casual relationships were not a part of God's plan. God wants us to be committed to people. So you and that other person have to both want to be in a committed relationship. If you're not ready and you want to still kind of wander around and drift off and experiment, then and then you try to get with someone who wants to be committed, there's going to be a conflict. And those conflicts cannot be resolved because you're on 2 totally different pages. You're not equally yoked. So that's the first thing you got to ask yourself. Do you really want to be in a relationship? And it's so funny, because when I'm in conversations with people, a lot of times I'll say, well, what is it that people really want? And then when you find out, they don't know what they want. They're just sort of drifters. And that comes from not being connected to the Most High God and not understanding that God has a purpose for your life. And you're going to be happier. You're going to live longer. You're going to look better when you're in a God ordained, committed relationship. And the world teaches you something else. The world teaches you that, you're going to miss out on something if you're committed. That marriage is like almost like a prison. It's like shackles. When really the opposite is true, when God is the head and the person who is guiding everything. So that's why you're going to have breakups, because people just don't want to be in a relationship. If you want to be in a committed relationship, make sure that you get involved with somebody else who wants to be committed, not someone who's sort of getting up and life is one big party. It's like hedonism. It's all about experimentation. It's all about, I'm just going to go around. I'm going to sleep with this person. I'm going to be with this person for a while. I'm going to break up. And if you kept doing that, this is how people become so broken, because every time you hook up yourself with a person and then there's a breakup, you become more broken. The human brain stores every single thing that you experience. So all of those experiences, everything you've heard, everything you've seen, everything you felt, that never ever goes away. So the more you do this, you're in and you're out, you're in and you're out, you're up and you're down, and you're up and you're down. It just makes you more of a broken person. And that was not God's original plan. Again, if you want to, you got to make sure you want to be committed. And then here's another thing, and this is just a part, it's not really a part of it, but you got to know what you're supposed to have and what you want. Because a lot of times, again, people don't know what they want. They think they want something. And I have a saying that I've taught to my daughter, I've taught this to my students, that so often people get what they don't want to know they don't want it. That's because they're sort of trying it out and then like, oh, you know what, I thought I wanted this, but that's not what I wanted. We must learn that without God, we can do nothing that's going to last, that is going to have meaning, that's going to have significance. We have to go to God. We have to ask God, God, what is it that you want from me? What is the plan for my life? Order my steps. Tell me where to go. Tell me if this is, because if you're not doing it for God, if God is not in the midst, you're just in it for in vain, and it's not going to last, and it's going to cause a lot of pain. So that's one reason. Another thing, and this is probably the situation with Klay and Megan, is that they were incompatible. Incompatibility is probably the number one reason why people don't make it, because they're incompatible. Now, there's a saying that is partially true, and that is opposites attract. Well, opposites may attract, but they don't stay together. We can be attracted to one part of a person. Maybe it's how they look. Maybe it's because people are trying to get something that the person has, but we don't really like that person. If you're not compatible, if you don't have the core value systems you're not on the same page, and you don't have those core value systems in common, your relationship is doomed. And you can avoid this painful, again, roller coaster ride of getting together and breaking up, super gluing yourself emotionally to a person. And then just think about that. Just go back for a second. Think about if you super glued two sheets of paper, and then you tried to pull those two sheets of paper apart. You can already get the visual in your head. The paper is going to tear up. It's going to break up. That's how you are. You don't get to know people before you get involved. You get involved, you get emotionally superglued, get attached. Then, because you're totally incompatible, the relationship is not going to work. You're going to have a breakup, and it's going to break you up. And while healing can take place, you have to do a lot of work to heal. You have to do a lot to change a behavior that you're used to doing over and over and over again. And so here's some things you got to have in common. Number one, I believe you have to have the same thinking when it comes to your faith. Because ultimately, as I've said 1,000 times, everything we do has a spiritual base. And if you're not on the same page spiritually, and you don't believe God in the same way, it's just going to be a conflict. Because most people, they not only use their faith when they're, doing bad, but they use their faith for everyday living. It's God is just an integral part of their walk while they're here on this earth. So if you are in totally different opposite spectrums of that, there is going to be a clash. If I'm praying every day and you don't pray at all, if I believe in reading something that's going to nurture me and feed me spiritually, I'm getting spiritual nutrition from what I'm reading, and you don't believe that, we're just going to be incompatible. Another thing that's critical, and this is a very big one, is sex. If you and that person are totally different when it comes to sex and what are the expectations in the bedroom, there's going to be a conflict. And I know this is going to sound, and I'm not saying you should meet a person and ask them a whole bunch of questions, but you should really find out before you get involved with a person, what are their expectations of you sexually? And most of the time, if you've had conversations with this person, and you're trying to get to know the person, they're going to be disarmed and they're probably going to tell you the truth. And if you know you cannot meet those expectations, you really shouldn't get involved. Because if they have a certain appetite for certain things and you know you can't feed that appetite, guess what's going to happen? They're going to go outside of the relationship and get it. And that's tough because a lot of people are into some really sick and deviant stuff. And that deviation and that perversion is in everyday bedrooms now. And so if you are really a person, you're conservative, or you know that God does not want you to engage in certain practices because they go against what he has naturally made and what your body can even handle. If you try to get involved with that, there's going to be pain. There's possibly going to be physical pain. Again, the emotional pain because you bonded yourself physically and emotionally. And most of the time in relationships, we put a lot of mental energy in it too. So you put all this time and energy into something that's not going to work because you're not compatible sexually. That person wants something that you are simply not going to be able to give him. So you got to get that. You can avoid all this if you would just find out up front. And here's a mistake that a lot of people made. And I know when I was younger, I dealt with this a little bit. You meet a person and you recognize your differences, but you try to convince that person to think another way. It's not going to work. It's just, most of the time, it's not going to work. Somebody is going to influence somebody else. And that's why they say that bad company corrupts good people. Because if you are the one that's saying, okay, I believe that God wants me to live or do this with my body or engage, I'm not going to have sex until I know that I'm in a committed, loving relationship. And somebody else is just trying to satisfy some kind of carnal need or carnal desire, there's going to be a conflict and it's not going to work. And even if it works for a while, it is not going to last. You are not built to go through hundreds of relationships and sleep with hundreds of people or scores of people over and over and over again. Get with somebody, get with them, and then break up. That's not God's plan. That hurts people. You die spiritually from that. And again, you risk your body, you risk your mind, you mess up your mind, depression, all kinds of different issues come as a result of that. And so you got to find out if you're compatible. Again, if the person doesn't want to be in a committed relationship, and and I say it's unhealthy to have this casual, like I'm just gonna play around with this. You playing with it's like Russian roulette. You playing with fire. So that's another reason. Incompatibility. We talked about being compatible spiritually, compatible sexually, and also how you see marriage in general, because how you see the commitment. Bad religion is fixated, I don't know why, on gender and gender roles. What a lot of people don't understand, or they forget, it's just undeniable, irrefutable, that the Bible did not fall out of the sky. The Bible is a book that was written by men about people. Those people made stories, created stories about people and their relationship with God. Some people who go to seminary school and they study, they understand that man wasn't there when God made the world. So the stories they created, they were based on what man wanted to make up. They created the story. Some parts of the Bible may be true and actually happen, and some may not be. It's not to say that the Bible can't even be used, whether it's real or whether it's true or false, it's authentic or not. It doesn't matter. The point is that the Bible, the stories are there to teach you lessons. So when you read a Bible story, what you're supposed to do, because the book didn't fall out of the sky, remember it was written by men, you are supposed to glean the lessons, the life lessons, the principle. What's the lesson from this story? Again, these are things, you're talking about stories that were made about people and what they did. What they did may not be what God wants you to do today. And I'm not going to get deep into it, but in the Bible, they had slavery, there was rape. These things were a part of the people's culture. There was a lot of oppression and mistreatment of women. Does God want us to do that today? But because you get with people and they expect when you get in a relationship, there's this sort of hierarchy. I've seen stories where people will meet somebody and before the person has even had a conversation with them, they'll ask them something like, "Can you submit?" And then you're like wondering, like, where did that come from? Well, that came from the Bible. Because in that culture, they had this hierarchy. And what we forget is that again, it's not the Bible's not written to you. It's about those people. So what does God want us to do in relationships today? Well, if you try to live the way they lived 5,000 years ago, you're going to be in a divorce. And that's what's happening because that doesn't work. Because the real purpose of marriage is companionship. The real purpose of being in a committed relationship is so that you can complement each other. Complement with an E, COMPLEMENT, where you complete each other, you support one another, you're there for one another. There's really no other reason for it but companionship, because you need companionship to have the highest level of living possible. Elevated living comes when you are in relationships that are committed and people love you and they love you unconditionally. And there is that commitment to each other. And God is the source that guides you. But because of bad religious teaching and the misuse and understanding of the Bible, you got people teaching like man got to be the head, the woman has to follow, you got to submit, and so people take this stuff and they trying to do it. And guess what's happening? The divorce rate is 60%. And now, because of the 21st century, women no longer feel the pressure to be married. Like before, you could almost be, alienated because you were not married. You were looked at in a bad way. A part of your womanhood was being in a committed relationship with a man. But today, people are saying, I don't want to suffer in a relationship. And that's what bad religion teaches you, that you're supposed to suffer. That because of this story that men made up about creation, you're just supposed to suffer in a relationship. And if you don't believe, and that is not God's plan. Again, you got to understand, instead of using the Bible as a tool to study and learn from what worked, what didn't work, that didn't work. Then I mentioned this in other episodes. You got people who believe because some biblical characters had more than one wife, that they're supposed to have more than one wife. They say that, that's just natural. A man can't just have one woman. Oh no. So then again, you have when you bring in all these different people in a relationship that should have a certain covenants and sacredness, you're gonna have all problems. You get emotional, spiritual, physical, disease, pregnancy, all these bad things. And it didn't work 5,000 years ago. And sometimes I really shake my head. People are trying to create a culture that had issues. So instead of learning from those issues and saying, God, we're going to be better today, and we want to have you guide us today, they don't. And your relationship is not going to last. So when it comes to incompatibility, you got to be on the same page spiritually. You have to know what a person wants sexually. You have to know what the expectations are in that relationship. You got people, and this is something that no one ever talks about. So bad religion teaches a man is supposed to provide, he's supposed to be the head, he's supposed to be all these different things. What happens if the man can't be that? He doesn't make a lot of money. He may not be, intellectually, he may not be the smartest down the block. Like there's so many factors that and many men deal with it. That's why they can't be in a relationship, because they've been inundated with this, again, bad teaching, distorted teaching that they're supposed to be one way, and then when they can't be that way, they feel inadequate as a man, and so therefore they become dysfunctional and toxic. And so I've seen that up close and personal, and it's really unfortunate. And we don't have to be that way. You go to God and you ask God, God, what are we supposed to do in this relationship? And if you're poor and you love one another and you're committed to one another, y'all will be happy. If you're both imperfect and you love one another and you're committed to one another, and God, you love people the way God loves people, you will be happy. and your marriage and your relationship will really last. But that's not what's taught. So it's not simply going to work. Last thing when it comes to compatibility, you got to be on the same page with money. Money is another reason, or should I say, the attitude about money is one of the biggest reasons why people end up not staying together. Number one, at some point in history, people started teaching money was a reason to get married, to put yourself in a better position financially. Sometimes, women were taught you marry somebody with money. Now you have what they call the hobosexuals. They're getting with women because they don't have any money, they don't have a place to stay. Money was never meant to be a factor for relationships, because you can have money today and your money could be gone tomorrow. And we see that happening every day. But when money is a source or reason why people are together, there's always going to be trouble. There are so many people who are getting killed because the spouse, wanted to get the money, so they have these insurance policies. The next thing you know, somebody is dead. The spouse, the man, has killed a woman because he wanted her insurance policy so he can live another life or live some kind of crazy life, because money is not why you're supposed to be together. Again, God made relationships between a man and a woman for companionship. And if you get together because of money, and then money is a master for some people. That's what controls them. They do everything just because of money. You are going to be miserable. And that relationship can be highly dangerous, because a lot of times the person with the money holds all the power. And then if you want to have the money, then you got to do whatever they say do. And it's going to be sick. It could be really crazy. And that happens too. And that was never the reason. One of my favorite quotes about money is that money is an excellent servant, but a terrible master. When money is controlling you, you will do anything for it. And that's what you have. That's how you got your Instagram models. They know that if they plaster their bodies all over the internet, somebody sees it. Some people are willing to pay to have an experience. Again, because people are not taught how beautiful committed relationships are. And then when they do get in a committed relationship, they got all these bad teachings. And that's why the Christian church, their marriages don't work either. I want to sit in. I've been saying I was going to ask, could I do this on a counseling session of people that, some churches don't marry people unless they go through counseling. And I want to really sit in on one of those. And I know somebody who got married, and I'm telling you, and she was sharing different things they were saying. And I'm like, that is bad counsel. Like telling people things like, if you're bad with money, let your spouse handle money. No, which leads me to the next one, immaturity. We'll get there. But if you're not able to handle money, you're not able to be married. Both people have to be able to handle the money, because if something happens, you both have to be responsible and know what to do. And when you're not able to be responsible with money, you're just not ready to be. I'm not saying you're a bad person. You're not ready to be married. We're gonna get to immaturity in a soon. But again, you gotta have be on the same place when it comes to how you see God. You have to have the thing about sex. You gotta know what each other needs and wants. And if you know you're not able to meet those needs, you really don't need to be in a relationship, because they're going to go outside of the relationship to get whatever it is. Again, you got to have finances have to be, you got to have the same views on money, because money can be a terrible master. And when it is, people will do anything for money, and you put your life at risk. So there are some things you got to have in common. Now, you can have differences, and there are some things that you can compromise on, which leads me to another reason why many people can't stay together, is because they do have different personalities, but they don't understand the science of compromise. In order to be in a relationship, you have to compromise. Now, I'm not talking about giving up your values. I'm not talking about changing your identity. I'm talking about knowing how to healthily compromise. And compromise, the way I taught it, and I still teach it this way, is you get some of what you want, but not all of what you want. If two people want different things and it's not a major issue, you got to meet that other person halfway. So let's say a person likes MMA fighting and the other person likes to go to see operas and ballets, and y'all like two totally different things. The way that you get close in a relationship is that you have to have experiences, shared experiences. So you have to compromise. I don't really like MMA, but I'll go with you to a couple of fights. The other person will say, well, I really don't like, theater, live theater, or ballets or operas or whatever, but I'll go to that kind of compromise. When it comes to money, you sit down and you talk about the money. And see, a bad religion, only one person can make the decision about the money, right? And that person is usually the man. Well, what if they make bad decisions? And you have this a lot because if you make $1 million and you spend $1 million, you're broke. You got these athletes out here and they make all this money, and then the next thing you know, you're hearing about they're broke. You mean to tell me you made $500 million, $500 million, and you're broke? That happens because when you don't sit down and you don't use wisdom and you don't have that companionship and that love and that guidance from God, you can't make good decisions. And so it's all about, well, let's just go out and buy all this stuff. Let's try to live this life of materialism, which is a trap and it's a trick. And so therefore you have to have compromise. And some people just can't do it. If they can't have their way, they're not gonna do it. That's called selfishness. And some people believe and say on a clinical level, it's narcissism. When I will only do what I want to do and I won't listen to anybody. And let me tell you something, when you meet people like that and you marvel, and then when their life just crashes and burns, because I'm older now, and I've seen people in their younger days, they just squandered their youth. Nobody could tell them anything. They wouldn't listen, and they wouldn't let you be the helpmate that you could be because they're just so fixated on whatever they want, and whatever they want is real twisted and dark. Well, guess what? Now they're suffering. And that's what happens to a lot of people because they don't know how to compromise. Compromise can only take place when you know what I'm going to say, when God is in the mix. If he's not first, if he's not the one who's guiding everything you do, you can't compromise. Those are things that come as a result of the fruit of the Spirit when you are connected to the Most High God. It's not about selfishness. And I heard a guy say this, and I thought it was deep. When I wrote my first book, I interviewed different people about love and what was love and relationships. And there was a guy that I met. He said something he said, the opposite of love is not hate. It is selfishness. It's when people are not able to compromise. They're not able to get beyond just what they want and do what is best for the relationship, for the unit, and for the family. And that is so true. And I believe that. I've adopted that. I really do believe that. So I mentioned immaturity, and I'm going to come back to that. So we have dealt with so far, people don't really want to be in a relationship. They don't know what they want. We've dealt with incompatibility, one of the biggest reasons why relationships don't work and they end. We've talked about bad religious teaching. The divorce rate among Christians, so-called Christians, is just as high, if not higher. And it's not going to get better until they start changing what they teach. They're teaching the wrong things and they're misusing the Bible. And anytime you have people who are ignorant and they teach ignorance, you're going to have something bad happens. And that's just what you have. You just keep having these bad teachings and relationships won't last. Now I want to talk about immaturity because I mentioned that I've heard some really bad counsel, marriage counsel. Years ago, one Saturday, I was driving around doing my errands and I was listening to the radio. And this was a show that was about money. They had a couple on there. They were married and they were giving advice about marriage. And the couple said something, and this is a common teaching, that's why I'm mentioning it, about, one person is bad with the money, the other person should handle the money. And that is how people end up having problems in marriage because one person should never have handled the money. Both people have to be mature enough to handle money. And both people have to pay bills. Both people have to know how to sit down and do a budget. Both people have to know how to save. Like if a person is bad with money or two people are bad with money, it's simply not going to work because we need money. Money is a major part of our lives. And it's not the money that messes people up is what people do with the money, or it's people not knowing how to handle money. I know people personally, they would just get paid and just spend their money any kind of way. If they wanted to go buy them a new fishing pole, if they wanted to just take it into the strip club, like they didn't sit down and think, okay, we got to pay these certain bills first and we have to have a plan. None of that. And a lot of people live like that. And then when I first moved to Atlanta, I had never seen a person like kicked out of their apartment or house. I'd never seen that. When I came here, I saw people's stuff on the side of the street. I remember just being so emotional. One morning I was driving to work and I saw these people's stuff all over the streets, and I was like, whoa. But you have a lot of that because if you don't know what to do with money because you're immature, you're never going to have it, and you're never going to be satisfied because, again, some people, money is a god to them, and that is their master, and that's all they're focused on. And money is not the reason why you should ever be in a relationship. If you're married because you're trying to get money or somebody trying to get money from you, disaster is sure to follow. Going back to immaturity, another thing we talked about, compromise. If a person is not mature, they can't compromise. They're only going to want to do what they want to do. Like a 3-year-old, 3-year-old doesn't understand the reasoning like, hey, we got to all work together. We got to compromise. At 3, and I work with adolescents, so I work with teenagers every day as a teacher. I've done that for over 30 years. And I can tell you when I'm talking to a person that has the mindset of a teenager. And there are a lot of people walking around here. They think they want to be in relationships, but they really don't. What they really want is one or two things. It's usually money or sex. And they try to get in these relationships to get those things. And they're not mature because they don't understand. In the end, they would be happier. They would live longer. They would feel better. They would have more if they were to commit and be in a relationship. But you got to be mature. Unfortunately, a lot of people have gone through trauma, gone through very bad situations as a child that were beyond their control. And science has talked about this. And when you go through trauma and you go through these really bad moments, your brain really is affected by that. And sometimes it's not fully developed as it should. In other words, that growth that you should have is almost stunted. And so while you can heal and work on that, it's very hard. So you got people in relationships, they've gone through all kinds of mess, they're immature, and they're not trying to heal because they really don't know that anything is wrong with them, or they do know, and all they do is they complain about other people. And that's what you have on the internet a lot. You have these people, and these either women just bashing men, or you have men that just bashing women. And that's because the real issue is with them. The immaturity that they have prevents them from being in a relationship. Immaturity will inhibit you from having a strong, healthy, beautiful relationship. And so a lot of healing has to take place. And you got to work to heal. Healing, people ask me, and I've been asked this question, should I take an X bag? Should I, give this person another chance? And I always say, if you went through hell and high water in that relationship, and you cannot see the evidence where that person did the work to become better, they're not better. Because rhetoric is something that's very cheap. You can say anything, words are cheap. But you have to actually do work to heal so that you can become mature. And I'm telling you, we can heal if we will put God first, and people will go through the process of understanding the truth and not these lies that have been taught. And we can start to build our families. And that's what's going to save our community. Um, Last but not least, we talked about everything. I think the last one is the wrong purpose. So again, what is the purpose of a relationship? It is for companionship. It is so that you and that person can support one another, and you have to love one another unconditionally. And again, love comes from God. It comes through people. So without you understanding the clear purpose of what God wants for you in the relationship is not going to work. Bad religion uses the Bible in the wrong way to teach about relationships. So you get in a relationship and you think your purpose is to just, well, let me just go back. The purpose for women in bad religion is just to take care of the man. It's not to have a life of her own. It's like the gifts that God has given her, maybe to be a doctor, to be an attorney, a teacher. That's not taught in bad religious circles. She is oppressed. She is suppressed. She's mistreated. She's not loved. She's not nurtured. She's not cared for. She's treated almost like a birthing machine. Get married, have all these babies. And I'm gonna tell you something right now, and I've seen this over and over again. When women are not treated well, good things are not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen for that individual man. It's not gonna happen for a community. Bad things are gonna happen in the community. Bad things are gonna happen to that nation. God made women to be honored and to be cared for and nurtured, because women are the ones that give birth. And I still, again, I shake my head when I think about places where they oppress women, but the men wouldn't even be there if a woman hadn't given birth to them. They're willing to kill women. They're willing to beat women. They're willing to keep her down. And she's miserable. And you can look at some of these women's faces and you can just see they're one age, but really they look literally 10, 20 years older than they should be, because they've had that hard life. But without them, there would be no life. Without them, there would be no citizens in the country. And so that's another thing. If you don't understand your purpose, if you believe your only purpose as a man is to provide and to take care of and to be the leader in all these things, but what if you can't be that? What if you don't make enough money to pay all the bills? What if you're scared of everything? My daughter's a millennial, and we often joke about this. She was telling me about these young men are afraid of everything. They're afraid of spiders. They're afraid of everything. So it's hard to be a protector when you're that afraid. Some people might be afraid, but because they have God and they have faith, and they can go beyond their fear and do what they got to do. I remember there was a guy, and there was a snake had gotten into his house. His wife never knew about it because he got his son. They got that snake out of that house. He might have been afraid of the snake, but they were still able to get it and get it out, because that's because of their faith. They were men of faith, and they taught their sons faith. So that's a part of the problem too, is you have the wrong purpose, because your purpose is to be together and to support one another and love one another, regardless of the financial status. Now here's another one, and I know people have their preferences and attractions, but a lot of times in relationship, I see this a lot. You have a person and they got a whole lot of problems. They got infirmities. Their teeth could be yellow. They could have scars all over their body, rolls in their head. But then, and they want to be in a relationship with somebody who will accept them as they are, but they don't really like that person. They with that person because that person is more like a stable person for them. But what they really want is somebody else. And the person who is willing to accept them as they are, they won't accept. That person may have a flaw too. They may be overweight. They may not be whatever. As I was saying, when you get one person who is willing to accept someone who is not perfect, but the other person is not able to accept that person, two people have to be able to accept the person's imperfections. It's just not going to work. That's another reason. Let's keep going. I want to say something about communication, because when I heard the comment that allegedly Klay Thompson made about Megan Thee Stallion, allegedly, he couldn't take her ghetto behavior or ghettoism or whatever, I wonder, had he communicated that? Like, how can you be in a real relationship and you cannot tell people how you feel? And it's not about trying to change them, but I wonder, did he ever say, baby, I'm a very quiet person. When we go out, I like to, have quiet romantic moments with you. The person who exposed this friend of Klay Thompson's, that content creator had a video, and it showed Klay and Megan and somebody else or some other people with them, and it looked like they were going out to dinner. And you could see Megan, behaving sort of festive. Her hand is up. She's talking. She has her long nails. And Klay was clearly uncomfortable. He was not comfortable. He was not feeling good about that. I don't know how hard it is to have a conversation about, there's a time and there's a place. And, we're at a football game and we're cheering on the other team. And even that has to be sort of regulated because of your festive behavior, which some people call it ghetto, whatever. If that's disruptive to other people, I could see how it could make someone feel uncomfortable. But what I don't understand is, why can't you have that conversation? Because relationships do have the potential to help us to grow as people. So if there's an issue with things that make me feel uncomfortable, why am I not able to just express that? And we work through that. And it goes back to those other things like compromise, maturity, um, being able to communicate, having God as the center and having God as the head and the king of the kingdom. You ought to be able to have those conversations. And that's what's really unfortunate, because a lot of people, they're not able to just tell people, express how they feel. And then the other part of being mature is you have to be able to listen to people. And what I realize is that listening is one of the greatest acts of humility. A lot of people, the reason why you can't communicate with them because they don't want to listen to you. They won't let you finish a sentence. They cut you off, or they just tune you out because they're so selfish and they're so into their own thing. They just don't want to hear what anybody else has to say. You have to humble yourself to listen to another person express other people express their feelings and how, their opinions about things. And that's another reason why a lot of people can't be in a relationship, is because they don't have good communication skills. They neither know how to speak nor know how to listen. And without being able to listen to another person, you can't grow. Now, I'm not saying that people ought to have conversations all day, every day. I do believe that timing is a critical element when it comes to communication. You have to know when it's, we're going to sit down and have these talks. Because I don't believe that as soon as a person walks in the door, you start having a conversation with them. I don't believe that sometimes even during the moment of some kind of conflict that you should have the conversation. Sometimes because the emotions are so high, you need to wait to have the conversation. But communication is powerful in a relationship and can really help people to stay together and be happier if they know how to listen, how to speak, and when. I was watching The Pivot recently, and they had an episode with the former basketball players. I want to say J.R. Smith. But anyway, I didn't know anything about him. I really don't keep up with sports that much. But in his interview with them, he basically said he kept a lot of things inside and he suffered in silence because he didn't know how to communicate. Because he was basically afraid, if he communicated his feelings, he was afraid of having to deal with confrontation. And that's what a lot of people are afraid of. But it shouldn't be like that. We should be able to sit down and talk to people. And even though we have differences, we should be able to maturely work through those differences, through compromise, through mutual respect. Again, God wants people to have companionship because you need it. But you can't have it if you're not able to communicate your feelings. Person just dismisses what you have to say. Then if you do say something, sometimes people will attack you for whatever you feel. And they'll just sort of blindlessly attack you, like they haven't thought about, well, why does this person have this feeling? Why are they feeling whatever? So that's another major issue in relationships, is a lack of communication. I don't know if Klay didn't just tell her, but the thing about this situation is that he had to have known how Meg the Stallion was or is, because she is a public figure, and her music and the way she carries herself is her persona that is just public and open for anyone to see. So, which leads me to believe that he really wanted to be in a relationship with her in the first place. Was it all about just kind of experimenting? And again, somebody's going to get hurt. And the thing about time, you can never get it back. When you spend time, years, months, some people spend tens, scores of time with people, and it's just wasted time. Now, I know some people, they're in healthy relationships, and I know people who are not in healthy relationships, and they've been together for long periods of time. And some people just believe I'm just going to be together because, especially older people, they were taught that they were supposed to be married and that they're supposed to just take it and endure and go through all kinds of hell and high water. And in the end, may the best man live and survive. That's kind of the mentality that some people have. But today, people are not going to do that. So I want to wrap things up because I never want to go over an hour. But number one, here's some reasons why relationships don't work and people are not equally yoked. Number one, they really don't want to be in a relationship. People want to experiment and play around, and you can't be an experiment because your body, your mind, your life can't take that. You can't be a part of that. There are too many risks for that. The other thing is incompatibility because you don't have those core values in common. You don't have the same mindset about spirituality, about money, about family, about sex. Those are things that you got to know that you all are kind of on the same page, because if you're not, there's going to be conflict. And whenever there's differences and there's conflict, usually there's not a lot of peace in that relationship. Those clashes, they begin to take a toll on the person and the relationship is not going to work. So bad religion, I cannot stress upon people enough that if you don't get clarity and you don't get the truth about how to use the Bible and about God, you're just going to suffer, keep suffering. Whatever they're teaching in these churches about marriage is not working because the divorce rate is just as high and people are not marrying anymore because, again, they don't feel that pressure to marry. Women don't feel like, oh, if I don't marry, then I'm less than. If I don't marry, I'm going to miss out on something. And I live in the Atlanta area and people are going through it. These women are marrying men and the men don't really want to be with women. Are they marrying them just for their money? They're marrying them because they need a place to stay. Things like that. A lot of people are going through it. And younger women are seeing this and they're seeing women get beaten and killed. And they're saying it's just not worth it. So until we change that, until somebody is helping our men learn how to navigate through things, it's just not going to happen. So bad religion, telling people they're just supposed to endure pain, it's not going to work anymore. We talked about immaturity. If you are not mature, you cannot be in a committed relationship. It's just not going to work. Both people have to be mature. It can't be, oh, this person is better with money than I am. This person can do. No, you both have to be on the same level of maturity in order for the relationship to work. Compromise. Every relationship, I don't care if it's your job, I don't care if it's a marriage, I don't care if it's parent, child, husband, wife, coworker, siblings, you gotta have compromise. No one person can have everything he or she wants in the relationship. It's simply not gonna work. Again, if you're in a relationship for the wrong reason, it's not gonna work. If you're in there because you wanted money, you wanted clout, you wanted sex, whatever it is you wanted, but you didn't want the relationship for the right reason, which is companionship, it's just not gonna work. Don't forget about the critical nature of communication. Read all you can about how to be a better communicator. It's going to involve listening, though. That's the key, because if you're with a person and they won't listen to you, and depending on the person in your life and where they are, you might still deal with them, but it's going to be hard to be in a marriage with a man and woman and they don't listen. And I'm not saying, and then they don't know how to communicate. You should never be raising your voice. People shouldn't be cut off. They shouldn't be put down and criticized and demonized because they have an opinion. You can deal with that opinion or that idea, But most people, because they never learn how to communicate effectively, they're going to have to be alone because words have incredible power. And if you don't know how to use them, it's just not going to work. Last but not least, and I hadn't talked about this, is we have to start to talk about um, unconditional love and the idea of looking beyond just certain superficial things and learning how to love people. Now, I cannot watch the show, but I like the concept, Pop the Balloon. And one of the reasons why it's hard to watch the show is because when you watching the show, what you realize is how people make decisions about their relationships based on very superficial things. I'm not saying that looks aren't important and people shouldn't look at looks, but everybody has some kind of imperfection with their looks. Like, you might be attracted to them, but their looks can change, or they may have some kind of infirmity or some flaw. And while they want to be accepted, they're not willing to accept somebody else. And I mentioned in another episode, there was a part of the show, one clip from a show that went viral. And it was a man, he had rejected, a beautiful girl, rejected her because of her hair. He said that he didn't like her hair short like that or curly like that. It was natural, kinky hair. She had 4C hair. But it looks like she had washed her hair and put some stuff on it to make it curl or whatever. The irony is her hair was exactly like his hair. His hair was the same hair. And another person on the show kind of read him his rights and basically said, look, you're talking about her hair, but your mama's hair like that. Your hair is like that. So a lot of times you have that, and it's really unfortunate that people can be flawed. They can have yellow teeth and scars all over their body, but they won't accept somebody else because that person is overweight or that person has some flaws. And instead of trying to love each other and work together, they totally reject that person. In the end, it's going to be hard to find somebody to love them with their yellow teeth and the scars and the rolls in their head and all the other issues. Nevertheless, if we could get right with God, everything could change. Well, that's the end of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to Bad Thought Therapy. Have a wonderful day.